This is Colonel Doug Macgregor, CEO for Our Country, Our Choice. We're back again with Dane Wigington, and he's the lead researcher, so everybody understands this clearly, for geoengineeringwatch.org. And he has been raising the alarm about the atmosphere, about what is happening, the weather. Why is it behaving in the way it is? Is it in fact different from what we've seen in the past, and what could be causing these things? And in the previous segment, we covered a lot of interesting information in connection with the Aurora Borealis that was seen over New York City. We want to talk now more about something that Dane's been harping on, no pun intended, called High Altitude Auroral Research Project, that's been with us for many, many years and theoretically was shut down in 2015. But Dane tells us that's misleading.
Yeah, they never even missed a beat. The facility was never even shut down in any way, shape, or form, Colonel Macgregor. And it's a sleight of hand because too much attention was being focused on that facility, and the ramifications from it are grave and many. And what's so beneficial to those in control with the HAARP facility is that they don't need massive amounts of personnel to wield that weapon of mass destruction. It's very covert, and for some might look benign sitting out in the open of the Alaska forests, but it's anything but benign. And the more they've poked and prodded at the atmosphere, the more damage they've done. And paradoxically, then the more compelled they feel to intervene at even higher levels to try to mitigate some of the damage that their poking and prodding did in the first place. So when we look again at how thin the atmosphere is on the planet, and an analogy, it's as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball. That's what allows us to live here. If we treat that with this kind of contempt, we're not going to be here long, Colonel Macgregor. And back to the extraordinary Aurora Borealis, which I think was sighted as far south as Texas in this case. When you cause chain reactions in the atmosphere, an already damaged atmosphere, and you're using that to steer the jet stream, which again is part of what HAARP does. This chain reaction that's created in the atmosphere with small input of 3.6 million watts of power causes extraordinary heating in the ionosphere, which causes the atmosphere to expand up and down. The downward push creates what's known as a high pressure heat dome. Have you heard that term mentioned, Colonel Macgregor?
Not very often, but
media.
But not very often, but one of our viewers had a quick question, wants to know, if possible, can you explain why Ted Stevens was so anxious to have the facility in Alaska, or perhaps why Alaska was chosen? Was it simply because Ted Stevens offered the Department of Defense a free hand in ways they might not have gotten elsewhere?
Well, certainly, I would lean toward the latter. I mean, they simply are all scratching each other's back behind the scenes, and the amount of
is there any benefit to being in Alaska instead of being down in Texas or Oklahoma or somewhere else?
Certainly. That high latitude enables HAARP to, one, be in a very remote location, and two, because of atmospheric conditions and what's happening in the Arctic, it's certainly more strategic for it to be there. And three, if we look at the original reason for putting HAARP there, and the patent holder, Bernard Eastland, was the original stated purpose was they had an abundance of energy there that they were trying to put to use. That's where Bernard Eastland came into this. In fact, there's a documentary that was on, I believe, Discovery Channel and History Channel called Owning the Weather. They've done their best to try to sweep that under the rug, but it's very well documented in that presentation as to why the HAARP facility was put there and the excess available energy they had to power this facility. And as well as, again, atmospherically speaking, from that location, they have more potential and possibility. And the changes in the Arctic are so profound that they probably felt this facility being there would help them to mitigate atmospherically some of those changes by their manipulation of the jet stream and a potential for keeping the Arctic cooler, which clearly has not worked. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than any place else on the planet. So bottom line is you can't tinker with the atmosphere without repercussion, and we're seeing that now.
Now, you mentioned in the previous segment that there were other agencies We know that they have facilities for this sort of thing in Norway and Finland and Sweden. Are they part of the larger HAARP program, or are these extensions of other federal agencies? We're just curious because you talked about the overlap between various agencies and what they were exploring, such as methane.
We certainly know that they're all colluding and cooperating together. As I pointed out in the past at geoengineeringwatch.org, we have many historical government documents and Senate documents. One in particular, 800 pages long. Your listeners can search geoengineeringwatch.org, massive Senate document. Within that document, intergovernmental cooperation is outlined and called for, even between, quote, otherwise adversarial nations. You can't just engineer the climate over your own country without affecting the entire planet. So clearly they're all working together, Colonel Macgregor, and we know from historical record that even during the height of the Cold War, we had Soviet climate modification scientists touring U.S. facilities, our scientists touring theirs. So whatever surface tensions there has been historically colluding and cooperating on this issue. They're all working together. And if we can, let's plug this into Hurricane Milton, if I may, for a moment.
Yeah, please.
Colonel Macgregor, you might remember Hurricane Milton. It spun up far stronger, far faster than they originally scheduled. Do you remember that? It went to a strong Cat 5 immediately, just north of the Yucatan Peninsula.
Most people that were watching it at the time attributed that effect to just unusually warm waters.
That's true. The oceans are astoundingly warm. In fact, they were record high, breaking the record every day for 400 plus days. But there's other factors in that likely was the factor that caused it to spin up so strong so quickly. But that makes that storm much harder to manipulate. So it drifted southeast and got somewhat hung up on the Yucatan Peninsula. And there's a massive frequency transmitter in Cancun. And we recorded those transmissions at geoengineeringwatch.org that bumped that storm back onto the track that they had intended. I mean, it was ramped up to full strength, and it's not as good a map. We can see the transmissions from that facility, and we recorded that, but it doesn't overlay the storm on the same map. So that's something we would have to do to give the full picture of what happened. But bottom line is, it drifted to the southeast. The Cancun transmitter, which indicates intergovernmental cooperation, bumped that back onto track, and it went on its way. And when it made landfall, Colonel Macgregor, and we're told Cat 3, we can't find any surface metering that indicates that storm was anywhere near as strong as they stated when it made landfall. I'm not saying it wasn't powerful and didn't do damage, but I'm stating the statistics that were given officially do not seem to match any of the ground stations. Same is true with Hurricane Helene that we were told was a Cat 4. We cannot find any matching data from surface stations on wind speed. Storm surge, you might remember they said would be, quote, unsurvivable. And they all use the same term, don't they? Every station, it's obviously a script. They all use the unsurvivable storm surge term. We saw 8 feet, not 20 feet.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. Not that everyone is just reading from the same script, but that they could have been so imprecise. Why do you think they anticipated a much larger storm surge?
Well, they certainly sensationalized these storms. And what weren't we told in the case of Helene? We weren't warned in any way, shape, or form that this moisture would all follow a specific trajectory that we know was manipulated. We recorded the frequency transmissions that did it. You showed that on our last exchange. We weren't given any warning. North Carolina wasn't given any warning of what was about to happen to them, a completely unprecedented event. So it's perhaps a sleight of hand, look here, don't look there, and whatever agendas and objectives they're carrying out, we can definitively say these storms are absolutely positively being manipulated, period. They can make or break these storms anytime they want. If they didn't want Hurricane Helene to happen, it would not have happened. And let's weave that back into ionosphere heaters like HAARP. Because HAARP can affect the atmospheric pressure zones above these storms, thus affecting convection, it can shut those storms down. You can, as you're expanding the atmosphere with a downward push, you eliminate convection. You stop the drafting for that storm and you eliminate it. And the bottom line is there's other patented hurricane suppression technologies like Dynamat, which absorbs the moisture and brings it back down to the sea surface. They have many means of suppressing these storms. If they had any intention of doing so, they would. And I'm not saying that's a good thing either. The planet is trying to cool itself. The oceans are superheating. They're deoxygenating. They're dying by the day. There's 500 plus dead zones right now around the world, ocean dead zones. They're expanding by the day. These are anoxic and hypoxic zones. The fisheries are collapsing. So as the planet's trying to cool itself, I'm not saying that's a good thing to interfere with. But the bottom line is, if they didn't want these storms to happen, they wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I understand. Well, you've once again raised the alarm. And we're going to cover some more of this in the next segment. The next time around, we're going to talk about chemtrails and what that impact is, because it should not be seen as entirely separate and apart from the larger picture of weather manipulation. So if you like this, we strongly recommend that you go to republic.us. You need to sign up for an account if you want to be an interactive member. In other words, you want to take action. You want to tag politicians. You want to tell them what you've seen, what you've heard, what you think. And remember, it's a free speech platform. Nobody can censor you. Nobody can cancel you. So go to republic.us/Colonel, and you'll actually get a discounted membership. Instead of paying $180, you'll pay $120. Dane, thanks very much. We'll be back shortly with a discussion of chemtrails.